Who here knows what it's like to be overstimulated? Raise your hand. Raise your hand. Hi, if you do. Okay, so that's most of you, I'm guessing. So what is it like? Anybody know what it's like? Can anybody describe it in words? Feels like you're drowning. That's exactly the right way of looking at it. Anybody else? It'll also be right. Anything else? It feels like you're drowning. It's an overwhelming feeling. It's a feeling like you're in the middle of something and you can't get out. It's the feeling that you can't get your arms around something and process it and look at it in the right way. It's like being in a bottomless pit, actually. So I'm going to show you another video first instead. Who here has seen Thor Ragnarok before? You've seen it? So, this is a scene from said movie, and this is Loki falling into a bottomless pit. This is 30 minutes later. So imagine falling for 30 minutes. Imagine having the ground taken out from under your feet and just in free fall, in endless zero gravity, with no reference point, with nothing to touch, nothing to see, nothing to define yourself or the world by, but an endless expanse. Nothing but endless space and gravity with nothing to define yourself by. And to me, that's what overstimulation feels like. It feels like you have had the ground taken out from under you. You are no longer something that exists and has edges, but you exist in a world of endlessness, of infinity in the bad sense. Infinity literally means in, that means not, and finite, which means having edges. In that state of being someone who is overstimulated, you lack edges. You can't define yourself because you aren't defined. You don't know what things are, you don't know where anything is, and so anything might be everywhere, right? It feels like you're drowning, like you said. So the question is, why do we need edges in the first place? That's a question I've thought a lot about. I just got out from a lecture by Josh, my friend, who said that you as an autistic person crave boundaries, crave order, crave rules, and crave structure. Why is that? Why do we crave something that will give us edges and give us definition and give us structure? I would argue that's not unique to autistic people, actually. I think that's true of anybody, anywhere. Yes?
I would guess that it's because it gives you something to hold on to and it makes you feel secure.
Security is exactly the right thing. Because what happens if you don't have edges? You feel like you're not...
Out of sorts.
You feel out of sorts. You feel like you don't exist. And so... But the problem is that... Well, let me put it this way. To me, autism is the reality of living in a world where you live in a world of sensations that you aren't given the facilities to form into something that makes sense. To me, and I'm pretty sure about this, and I don't know if this is orthodox theory on autism, but to me it makes a lot of sense to say that autism is first and foremost a sensory disorder. Is that it is a world where everything sensory is bigger and more complex and more detailed and more intricate and louder and more rich than anything that a neurotypical person will ever experience. The neurotypical person, obviously, can take that and they can funnel it into a form. They can make it a shape. They can put it there and put me here, and then the world is safe. It's crystal clear. It's precise. But with the autistic person, it's like I'm taken with an overwhelming flood and torrent of sensation that I don't know how to form into anything. I'm just lost in it. I'm drowning, like you said. And in that drowning, in that endlessness, all you can do is cling desperately to life, right? And that's what stimming is it's an attempt to desperately define your own being. An attempt to desperately know who you are and where other things are. So, like, what do people do when they stim, for instance? The woman who gave the keynote talk, what was her name again? Anybody remember? Nancy, that's right. She flaps, and I never flapped before. I think it's because my hands are too big and it makes me feel uncomfortable. I don't know. But like, But the thing about flapping is that I've read people, neurotypical people, who flap, they say that when I flap, afterwards, I know where my hand is more than I did before. You know where you are. You know that you are. You know that you exist. That each part of you exists. An interesting thing is that as somebody who is kind of an amateur studying PTSD, is that it seems to be a psychological rule of humanity that we live, that human life is the process of transmuting what we see into what we are and what we do. People with PTSD, well, let's say that you have an Army veteran, okay? And I've talked to Army veterans who have confirmed this, and I've read about it a lot. If they're in a traumatic situation in war, and one of them, they're both in the same traumatic situation, if one of them experiences a stressful event, and has their leg cut off from it or something, and one of them experiences the same traumatic event and doesn't have their leg cut off, the person with the leg cut off won't have PTSD. They will not. But the person that keeps their leg will have PTSD. It's almost like when you have a traumatic, stressful event, it needs to be expressed somehow in who you are. It needs to become a part of you somehow. You can choose what that means. But for the person with their leg cut off, it's already decided. It means that's my amputation. That is the sign, the expression of the pain that I'm feeling. And a lot of people with internal pain do things like self-harm or addictions. They're ways of expressing and trying to come to terms with the thing they have experienced. In the same way, to me, as autistic people, we are trying to express through our stims the overwhelming world of sensations we experience, because we can't process it any other way. And the thing about that is that we are so scared by it. To me, autism as it normally is a terror of being, because we don't know how to handle the overwhelming world of sensations. But that is not autism in and of itself. To me, it is totally possible, and even has been done, to say that autism can not only be an overwhelming world of sensation, a cacophony of sounds, a plethora, a kaleidoscope of colors, but at peace with that, a way to trust it and work with it. And I want to help you get there today. I want to help you realize and actualize in your own life a way to funnel the world of overwhelming sensations and colors and sounds into something you are and something you do, in a way that is safe and a way that helps you be who you are safely, like Nancy mentioned earlier today. It was Nancy, right? Yeah. But I've thought a lot about how to get to that place. And to me, the best place to start is with a book called Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. It's by a guy named Shunryu Suzuki. Shunryu, or whatever, I don't speak Japanese. But I want you to think about the sky, okay? Think about the sky when you read this. So imagine that, and this book talks about it, but I'm going to summarize it instead. Imagine that you're looking at the sky and you see a cloud. If it's all cloudy, is the sky still there, right? You think it might not be, especially if it's cloudy all the time, but every time a cloud passes, the sky is still there behind it. The sky is what really, truly exists. To me, as autistic people, we are lost in the clouds, often. We are lost in particular things. We are lost in our obsessions. We are lost in our fixations. And that's not a bad thing. But to me, it's almost like our attention would be better spent not on the foreground, but on the background. Not on the clouds, but on the sky. So like, take this projector, for instance. You can see this little Windows logo or whatever, and you can see whatever BOSS is. I don't know. Probably that, I don't know. But really what you're seeing, while you see all of this, you're also seeing the wall, right? You're not only seeing the things we're projecting on the wall, but you're also seeing the wall. Now, I want you to do a little experiment. What happens if you look at the wall and not at the thing projected on the wall? Do you still see it? Do you still see what's projected on the wall? I think, at least for me, I do. What I've noticed is that you can think of the entirety of human life like that, is that everything you experience, every person you see, every color you see, every sound you hear, every feeling you feel is like a cloud passing across the sky, or a shape or a color projected on the wall. But if you look at the background, it's almost like, oh yes, then things have their edges again. I'm not lost in it because I can see what's behind it. In the words of Mr. Suzuki on page 106, I memorized the page number so I wouldn't get lost. He said, I have discovered that it is necessary, absolutely necessary, to believe in nothing. That is, we have to believe in something which has no form or color, something which exists before all forms and colors appear. And then he says this again. If you are always prepared for accepting everything we see as something appearing from nothing, knowing that there is some reason why a phenomenal existence of such and such form and color appears, then at that moment you will have perfect composure. If you look not at the person, don't lose yourself in their face, in the colors of their skin or the sound of their voice, but if you just look at the gaps between everything. And what do I mean by that? What do I mean by that? Maybe I can give a better expression of what I mean by saying that when I eat, I have a bad habit of eating very, very, very quickly. And it took me a long time to figure out why I ate quickly. But it's because I realized, it's because I didn't trust that I could stop eating and start eating again. I would eat, and because I was eating, I had to keep eating, and because I was eating quickly, I had to keep eating quickly, and because I was eating more quickly, I had to keep eating more quickly, because I didn't trust in something that wasn't eating, in something that wasn't me, in something that wasn't the food, but just existed behind and amid all of it. I was lost in the foreground and not in the background. Another way to say the same thing is to say that pay attention to the gaps between your thoughts, okay? Pay attention to when you think. If you think, sometimes there will be moments when you're not thinking, okay? Sometimes when you think, you have sounds or words in there that are just going and saying certain things, but occasionally when you listen, there's just a gap there. There's nothing. And if you pay attention to that nothing, the nothing will get bigger. And then you realize that like the screen, the nothing is there all the time. And it's the screen, the background, the space, the void on which everything is projected, on which everything is. And if you trust that void, nothing can scare you. If you trust that void, everything is just something on top. Everything is just something that is projected on top of it. It can't touch the void. Nothing can scare you if you live in this background, in the white space behind and amid everything. So I'm going to give some practical examples on how to do this. But before I do that, I want to say what Autism 2.0 is. You saw my lecture about Autism 2.0. To me, Autism 2.0 is autism, a state of mind and a state of being that perceives everything and acknowledges, like we do, the richness and the color and the sound of being, but one that isn't afraid of it, one that trusts it, one that lives in the world without having to flee from the world, that fully embodies being, that fully lives and acts out what comes to them. I would suggest that a way to do that, I think this is a very useful practical suggestion, is first of all, who's used a weighted blanket before? Does it feel nice? Why does it feel nice? Somebody say something. Go ahead.
Because it kind of helps to, well actually something that I love about my weighted blanket is how when you fold it all up together, it's so heavy.
Right, yeah.
And it's like, I can't carry this. How am I ever going to breathe at night with this thing on me, but then you unfold it, and the weight gets dispersed all across the entire blanket in these little pouches. And so having that weight be completely just dispersed evenly, oh, it's so
What does it do to you?
It makes me feel enclosed, but safe at the same time.
Right. It's like a cocoon, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It's like a cocoon, or an egg, or a womb even. It's like, there is, what I would suggest for my practical rule is to treat every sensation, everything you see, like the grayness of this little bowl, this little pole, like your skin color, your shirt color, which is red, or every sound. Imagine that as if it were a weighted blanket. That's my suggestion. Don't be threatened by being, be snuggled by being. Don't look at things as if they were threats, but try and get into a space where instead of being a threat, it is something that encloses you, that makes you feel safe, that makes you feel enclosed and protected. And it can take a while to get to that space. It really can. Because it's almost like living in the world of blaring traffic lights, and I mean, traffic lights don't blare, but the noises do. But like of glaring sounds and blaring lights and of these loud and colorful sensations that overwhelm us. It's lots and lots of conditioning that makes us fear the world. But it's almost like, let me tell you a story. I have a friend who has PTSD. Who has really bad PTSD. And I study PTSD, and I think PTSD has a lot of very similar symptoms to autism. Not all, but a lot of similar symptoms. She didn't trust being. She didn't trust the world. She lived in a world that was an enemy. And so for her, touch, like Nancy said, touch was a threat. To encounter something, not just through touch, but through any sense, was something that could kill her, in her mind. I think a lot of us are like that. We live in a world that is not safe. But what happened is that this person, she went to a massage therapist. And when she was like, the massage therapist was massaging her back, and she got to a point where she figured that, where she stopped resisting. She stopped fearing the touch. She started letting it in. And she started crying because she had experienced something really, really painful. And she didn't stop crying for 3 hours. And it's like, that touches you. I mean, it's not like that caused the pain or anything, but the pain was already there and it let it out. It expressed it, and then she felt healed. She was able to go into the world with a trust that wasn't there before. She was able to express her pain. The world was safe enough to express the pain. And touch can do that. To me, to encounter the world as if it snuggles me, as if looking at that, it's like this grayness is something that comes out to me, not to attack me, but to cradle me. It's almost like feeling the touch of everything before you touch it. Feeling the surface of everything without having to feel it, not as something that scares you, but as something that encloses you and protects you. To me, that is worth more than anything. Because what happens in touch, and when we love touch, is that we love being a being. To me, autistic people are afraid of being a being. It's not safe to be a being. Instead, it is almost like we're falling through a bottomless pit. We are in the endless expanse of not knowing where we are or where anything is because we don't trust anything. Because everything has proven to us again and again that it doesn't make sense. But when we begin to trust that this can take care of me, I mean, it can be threatening, obviously, like people get murdered all the time. But not as often as you think. Not as often as we act like. I think, to me, I act like I'm going to get murdered 24/7. But that's not statistically what happens. But if I act as if, by default, everything can enclose me, can protect me, then you'll start to realize that it can be true. You'll start to realize that instead of having to be afraid of other people out here, you know, like, I'm talking to you, but like, oh, I don't understand what your face is saying, and oh, and you're touching me now, and oh, I don't like what you're saying, and it's like, instead of being on guard constantly, you all of a sudden just realize that no matter what they do, no matter how much sense it doesn't make, this is safe. This is something that I can be safe with. No matter what foolishness I do, no matter what sense it doesn't make, it's okay. It is okay. Everything, I mean, except like a T-Rex knocking at your door, obviously. Everything is okay. You know? I mean, but that's the thing, is that things by default are okay. And then the other tip I want to give you, another tip I want to give you is to act as if you were a bit calmer than you are now. So let's say that I'm going up in a social interaction, and I'm really scared, I'm really anxious about this. How would I act if I were just a bit calmer, right? Well, maybe I might loosen my shoulders a bit. Maybe my breathing might slow down a little bit. Maybe my throat wouldn't be as tight, right? And then you just let those things happen. Do little things. And then maybe you remember that rule again, and then you're like, okay, maybe I need to just talk slower, you know? And then all of a sudden, it's a snowball effect of calmness. You begin to trust being. You begin to trust other people by default. And then they begin to trust you. Because that's the thing, is that as soon as you let people know that you aren't afraid of them, they won't be afraid of you. Go ahead.
So, in essence, even though you may be horribly anxious and terrified to the core inside, you act like you are not.
A little bit better. A little bit calmer. Because if you act like you're completely calm, that's something that makes you even more anxious, you know? That's something that can make you even scarier, is to say, oh, I have to be calm right now, you know, and that can be scary.
So what I'm hearing is that you're allowing yourself to feel your emotions, but you're also taking control of those emotions.
Yes, you're taking control over your actions, specifically.
So you're not allowing your autism to give you excuses from living your life, but you're using them as an advantage. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. It's like I go up to it's like, for instance, it's like I have to give a presentation, for instance. Let's say that were to happen hypothetically. If I'm really anxious and I'm breathing heavily, it's like I can do one thing. Actually, this isn't the rule that I came up with. I added a caveat in my notes. It's do what you would do in the next 3 seconds if you were a bit calmer than you are now. In the next 3 seconds. 3 seconds. Then you don't have to stress about it. Because if it's like, what would I do in 3 seconds? Obviously nothing big, you know? I would do something with my shoulders. I'd do something like tighten up my glasses, or maybe think something different. I might think, oh, maybe if I'm not scared, I would think, oh, maybe what is the color of the floor? And then all of a sudden, the world isn't a threat. And then I can approach being with confidence. I can approach the world as something that isn't scary, but something that can be welcoming and exciting, you know? When you don't defend against the world, all of a sudden the world is something that can promise you infinite possibilities. The other suggestion I give is to do something today that will make you feel safer tomorrow. I just got out of Josh's talk about scheduling, and that's what scheduling does, is it makes the world more predictable, and that can only help. If you make a schedule of your next day, it will be that much easier to trust. It will be that much easier to loosen your shoulders and just breathe. know? And there are other things you can do too, like what would happen if I cleaned my room, for instance? Don't you feel better after your room is clean? You know? Like if you clean your room, what happens is that when your room is clean, you feel clean. You feel like everything is safe. You know, you feel like I've ordered this place. This place is something I can be safe in. You know? And so that's the thing. And if you do that today, and tomorrow you live in a clean room, then you feel safer, you know? And if you do something like that every day, it's only a snowball effect. It gets better and better and better. And then here's another trick. And this is going to be controversial, I think. But here it goes. Make every decision as if it weren't important. Think about that for a little bit. Why? Ryan Miller once told me a story about a man who was on the spectrum, who was moving to a new apartment, and all of a sudden, he had these boxes that were here, and he had to start by picking one of the boxes, but he couldn't figure out which box to pick. And so he just sat there for hours, paralyzed. Because he couldn't, because it was like, this was a life or death situation to him. If he picked the wrong box, in his mind, he would die. So it's better to not pick any boxes and just stay there. So, to me, like for instance, I was supposed to write a paper like a month ago. And I was paralyzed in the same way. I couldn't figure out what to start with. And anything gave me the threat of picking the wrong thing. If I picked this, I might have done the wrong thing, and I might die in my mind. But if you make a choice as if it weren't important, or as if it were less important than you think it is, then all of a sudden you make a choice. And then you have momentum at least. Then you're moving to somewhere. And even if you make the wrong choice, that's not terrible. You know, if you make the wrong choice, that is better than not making a choice at all. And part of trusting the world is trusting that even if you make the wrong choice, it can and will be okay. Trust that no matter what you do, there is always at least a way to be safe. There's always at least a way to trust being, yeah?
What strategy would you suggest when earlier you said to plan your next day so that you feel safe? What strategy would you get somebody whose way doesn't go, their day doesn't go as they planned? Something happens, there's a glitch. What would you say to kind of get over and through that so that it doesn't become paralyzing?
Let me think about that for a little bit. I would suggest probably, oh, here's a quote. Remember why you planned it in the first place. Yeah, remember why you put that item down. Every how has a why. And oftentimes when we follow a list, we don't remember the why. Because if you remembered the why, you could put a different how down. So like if I'm planning out my day and say I work on my paper for a little bit, and then I play a video game, and then I work on a different paper for a little bit. And then all of a sudden, I can't work on the paper because my computer's dead and I'm out at the bus stop or whatever. I never use the bus, so I'm just making this up out of nowhere. If I do that, it's like, okay, why did I decide to do that? There might be a few reasons why. One reason might be that, well, I have to get my paper done. But if I remember that, I think, okay, if I have to get my paper done, can I get the same amount of work done if I do it in the evening? Yes, then I reschedule it for the evening. Remember the why. Another thing I would suggest, I kind of touched on this earlier. Trust the gaps. Trust silence. A lot of times you want to do things just to fill the gaps, to inhabit the spaces where there isn't anything, like the gaps in conversation, or the gaps in doing nothing, just to fill the space. But if you trust the gaps, The gaps are what lets you be you. If you trust the background of the screen, then all of a sudden, everything is what it is for the first time. Because the funny thing is that things only have edges on a background. Things are only safe when you have a background that gives everything definitions. It's here, and now it's not everywhere or anywhere, you know? So if you trust the gaps, the things that aren't anything, you know, the spaces that aren't anything, it's like trusting that I can put my food down and pick it up again a second later. If you trust that, then everything's okay. I want to talk for a little bit about meaning, actually, because here's another tip. I want you to think about control, actually. Meaning and control is what I want to talk about. It's like, I have a really bad habit of, in class, filling up the space and monopolizing conversation in discussions. And when I do that, I always feel embarrassed and ashamed since I shouldn't have done that. But the reason I do that is because I don't let other people be themselves. I figure that they're safer if I try to control them. They're safer if I go over there and say, oh, I'm going to think things for you because then you're safe. You know? If I do that, if I interject, that's fight or flight, by the way. That's doing something so they don't have to do it for themselves so that they can be safe, so that they can be safe for me. But if you trust being, then you don't have to do anything for them. Then you can simply and adequately just let them be who they are, watch them, and see what they do. And so my other suggestion is to, how do I put this? To watch things and let things develop without trying to, actually, I will simplify it. Just watch being. Listen to things. Watch things out of curiosity. Look at the world in a way where you're excited to learn something about anything. Where they know something that you don't. Where they are safe enough that I can say to you, I want to learn what you have to teach me. They're safe enough that I don't have to info dump on them, because then I can put them into my world of info dumping, but more that I feel safe enough that I can learn what you have to say, and I can trust that it makes sense, and I can trust that it's safe. Because when I do that, then it kind of, that's almost like a kind of connection, actually. So when you listen to somebody, and they listen to you, it's almost like a kind of reciprocal touch, or reciprocal enclosure, where you feel each other. I'll put it poetically. It's like the other person has resurrected themselves in your psyche. There's a version of them that lives in you. What they have taught has beamed into you and has become a different version of them. And they're a part of you now. They live in you. And that's what happens in touch, is that when I touch, both figuratively and literally, all of a sudden, I don't exist just on one side of my skin, figuratively. I exist on both sides. I can trust that I don't have to defend against being shrink into my own skin, as it were, but I can exist safely and calmly. Trusting that there is something over there that I don't have to snatch or fight, but just be at peace in, be at peace with, and trust that it is there, and it is a part of the same being I'm a part of. And life is safe, life is good, life is beautiful. That's what Nancy said today at the keynote lecture, is that I discovered that other people existed. I discovered that other people weren't just the same people as me. And I realized that, I mean, that's what she said, but you realize that they can be them without being a threat. They can be them without being scary. And that's wonderful. That is the most wonderful thing that exists, because then instead of there being only one person, there's 7 billion people. It's times 7 billion wonderful, you know? And then all of a sudden, you realize that that doesn't take anything away. It adds 7 billion people to the world that had just only been the fear of 7 billion snakes. 7 billion people that could kill you. Yeah, so another way to say that is to reference I Love Lucy. Well, shoot. Well, does anyone know Jerry Stewart's password? Well, I'll just depict it for you, okay? I'm gonna act it out. So, Lucille Ball is her name, and then Ethel, what's her last name? Anybody? Merman. So she's Ethel Merman, okay.
No.
Okay. Ethel, she's just a fictional character, I think. Ethel something.
Ethel was her neighbor next door.
Ethel was her neighbor next door. Okay, so Lucy's here, and she wants to, she's doing a dare. They're doing a dare with their husbands. It's like, oh, I can get a job, and I can do your job. I can be a worker just as well as you can be better than you could do a housework and be a wife. It's kind of sexist, but it was the 1950s. Give them a break. It's like, but what they're doing is that they're on a conveyor belt, they're wrapping chocolates, and then the woman says, okay, if you let one piece of chocolate get by unwrapped, you're fired. And they've already tried a number of other things. Okay, then they're like, oh, I'm going to wrap it. I'm going to wrap it. Oh, and this is pretty easy. Wait, is that one over there? Okay. Oh, here's another one. Oh, I'm wrapping and wrapping. Oh, here's some others. I'm going to stuff some into my bra. I'm going to eat some. I'm going to stuff some into my hat. And it's like, oh, and then it's like it's too much. And then some have already gotten past. But then when they've stopped, the conveyor belt stopped, and they've stuffed things into their hat, and there isn't any there. And the person says, "You're doing just fine, girls. Speed it up." And so that's like overstimulation. Sensation, experiences, cacophonous information streams in from the world, and we can't wrap all of it up into something that makes sense and is safe. It's not. It goes too fast. It goes in a way where it streams past me, and then when it streams past me out of here, it just is acted out in something that I do. It's like, yeah, it's like any bit of chocolate that streams past on the conveyor belt that I don't wrap up just goes out into the bottomless pit of sensation that we talked about, that makes you feel lost and makes you feel like, because it's unwrapped, because it's not contained and not safe, I'm lost in it. And these are really different metaphors, by the way, can you tell? But it's the idea that unless you wrap your experiences, unless you say what things are, unless you give them a context, unless you explain to yourself how they fit and how they are safe, in some way, they'll just stream past you, and then you'll be flooded by them. But more specifically and more on point, I want to bring home to you the idea that the world is a safe place. That the world is a predictable place, actually. That the world can be a place where you can exist and be yourself. Where other people can be themselves. And where you can exist with other people and find delight in that there are other people. That other people exist and that other things exist. And that I can touch them and learn about them and play with them and talk with them. And that's all okay. And that's safe. And that's wonderful. And that's beautiful. And that's lovely. But I want to bring home to you also the point that, like with trauma, people with PTSD actually often say that they're better after their PTSD than they were before, after they've healed it. They considered themselves immature and naive before, but now they've had this terrifying experience that they've processed and learned. I don't know what I'm going to do with this. I guess I'll hold it then. So that after they've had this terrifying experience that they've processed and learned, they're better than they were before. Likewise, I will suggest that autistic people, after they have learned to process and integrate their experiences, are maybe not better, but more developed than neurotypical people. After they have learned to make sense of the world, they are more mature than neurotypical people will ever want to be. And the reason for that is because they live in a richer world. We live in a richer world. We live in a world full of things and information that nobody else will ever see. And when we figure out how to make that into a shape, into something that makes sense, we will be superheroes. And we already are in germ. We will know how to organize being in a way where all the details, the leather on the couch, the silver on the pole, everybody's freckles and all the cracks on the sidewalk, the things we see that nobody else sees, that will all make sense. And it will all resolve itself into a beautiful whole, a beautiful, organized system that leaves out nothing, that oversimplifies nothing, that is what it is, and organizes everything into a complete, organic, beautiful system of relationships that is everything, that includes everything, that gives a place for everything. And that's my dream. That's my dream. And to somehow, some way, get to a place and to help other people get to a place where we can show and embody more of the world than has ever been possible before. Where we can see the world with new eyes. See it in a way where love and beauty and joy and an evocative color and sound is all a part of our lives. We don't pass it over, and we don't ignore it, and we don't push it away or hide it under carpets or repress it. We embody it in our very gestures, our very being, our very manner of bearing ourselves in the world. I was just learning about a thing called eurythmy, actually. Well, actually, I'll say something, I'll give this idea in a different way. I just did a paper on Hans Christian Andersen. And you know Hans Christian Andersen was the guy who wrote Little Mermaid and The Emperor's New Clothes. Hans Christian Andersen probably was on the spectrum, actually. He was a bad dancer. He auditioned for the Copenhagen Ballet and was weird and did tambourine and weird things. And so they're like, what are you doing? I'm like, throw that guy out. And so, but like, what is interesting about Hans Christian Andersen is that he wrote a lot of stories about inanimate objects or animals that had voices, that had faces, that could talk and do things. When I was a kid, I drew faces with a Sharpie on every piece of furniture in the house. And the reason I did that was because I wanted everything to be animate. I wanted everything to be alive. I wanted everything to have the same life that I knew existed. That I knew existed somewhere, at least on the inside. But why wasn't it on the outside? Why isn't the world I expect something that is in the world? Why can't I form the world of the rich colors and the rich sensations into something that is like more than just a pot? Oh, it's just a pot. Oh, it's just a chair. It's just a couch. No, it needs to have a face. It needs to have a way to be something beautiful, an artwork. Everything art, everything something beautiful. Everything an artwork. Everything something with intelligence and vivacity and color and beauty. And to me, we live in that world. We live in a world where everything is artistic. Everything is beautiful. But if we were to articulate that and embody it in our being, and our way of orienting ourselves and relating to the world, we would be unstoppable. We would be absolutely unstoppable. And other people would be afraid of us. So that's my talk, and I think we're almost done. So yeah, does anybody have any questions? Go ahead.
If there's like a situation where there's maybe somebody that represents a perceived threat, not necessarily that there is one, but perceived to the point that it has become a fear where it that to calm that so that you can be around that person? I don't know, mind tricks.
Mind tricks, yes.
Or whatever.
So you're talking about somebody who's afraid and they're taking your very presence as a threat, or is that what you're saying?
Yes, because what they come in their mind to represent.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Trigger, yes.
But a little beyond.
One thing that I've noticed is that things like that tend to settle into patterns. Oftentimes, I'll just tell a story. I once knew somebody who, they were fighting, and then they were kind of escalating in a way that they always escalate, you know? They kind of bounced off of each other. But then a third person came in and hugged one of the people, and then it stopped. The thing about doing something that is comforting but unexpected and that breaks the pattern is priceless. That's the thing, is if you're caught in a habitual pattern that you just see yourself getting into again and again and you want to stop it, there's nothing better that you can do than do something completely unexpected.
It's nice.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. So even if it's, even in situations where it's not nice, this is useful. So I once had a high school teacher who said that if he was ever playing against a chess grandmaster, being an amateur, the best chance he'd ever have was to just do completely chaotic random moves. Because that would freak him out and put him off his game, you know? And so I think he was talking about some general in the Civil War who did that and it worked, you know? That's the thing. Now, I was just reading a book just down in the lobby, just while we were waiting, about some guy who was in an altercation in the street where he was about to be mugged by a bunch of thugs. It rhymes, mug, thug. He was like, okay, he goes up to him and then he's like this scrawny guy and he's like, okay, the scrawny guy says this, would you like me to break your nose or your teeth first? And he's like, what? He's like, or do you just want me to rip off your ear? You know, and he's like, and then he's just like, okay, I'm gonna leave now. You know, so if you do something unexpected, it can sometimes save your life. You know, and so unexpectedness is a way to break through habitual patterns. There's another story about this, which is that in Denmark, there were a lot of Muslim teenagers leaving to join ISIS, and they just kept leaving, just in the middle of the night, just packing up their bags, leaving to go to the fight. But this town in Denmark decided to try something, which is to give full forgiveness to the people that left if they would come back. No legal consequences. And it worked. They came back. If you act in a way that breaks the pattern, both sides will be broken. That's what it means when Jesus in the Bible says, turn the other cheek. Is that if you turn the other cheek, the other person's like, wait, what's going on? So what Gandhi did, you know, when he did the march, the salt walk, you know, and they just walked up to people that would beat them. It broke the pattern. But also, it's like if you're in a habitual pattern of fear, and if somebody just drops cold water on your head, you know, it's like that's unexpected. Okay, what do I do now? Maybe stop being scared. So yeah, that's my roundabout answer to your question. Anybody else? Go ahead.
How the hell are you not doing TED Talks yet? Because your speech is phenomenal.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. I don't know, maybe on the way.
We have extra tickets to go see the movie tonight if you would like to attend the Avengers Infinity War. If you would like a ticket, please come to the front office. Thank you.
One of those tickets is mine. I was traumatized by it. Spoiler alert. So yeah, that's my talk. Thank you.